All right, so basically, we just talked about the anniversary of Super Mario World, which was on the 21st of November. Um, it's kind of strange but cool at the same time, but pretty much literally the day after that, November 22nd, basically marked the 24th anniversary of the Sega Saturn console, which was initially released back in 1994. Now, basically, the Sega Saturn is a console that basically does not get talked about nearly as much and is one that's considered to be underrated by many people, especially since it had some pretty cool games such as Nights into Dreams, Virtua Fighter 2, Guardian Heroes, Sega Rally Championship, Daytona USA. Such games like that really don't get talked about as much. And as far as having 3D gaming is concerned, basically, Sega did it before Nintendo did. Before Nintendo came out with the Nintendo 64 back in, I believe it was the summer of 96, somewhere in 96. Basically, in the latter part of 94, the Sega Saturn was released. And as far as sales is concerned, it didn't sell quite as much as the Sega Genesis did. In fact, it sold almost like around the same amount as the Nintendo Wii U did. The Sega Saturn sold a little bit over 9 million units worldwide, similar to that of the Wii U following its release back in 2012. But a lot of people can say that, due to Sony emerging into the console wars with the PS1, that could have had something to do with, basically why Sega Saturn was not quite as popular as the PS1 was, but it's an underrated console nonetheless. I mean, there were so many games from that console that should have been actually on the Sega Dreamcast, and a lot of those games really didn't get talked about because of, the PS1 and 64 becoming more popular, and pretty much those things, like, really, I don't know, I feel like in some ways it kind of diminished what kind of success that the Sega Saturn could have had. And not only that, it wasn't in retail for too long, because basically, like, by the time Sega came out with a Dreamcast console in '98. Everybody was talking about the Sega Dreamcast, but as far as basically anniversaries are concerned, it should be noted that the Sega Saturn was released on the 22nd, 24 years ago, and it's hard to believe that's been that long, especially for those who grew up as gamers back in the '90s, because I don't know. I mean, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago where Sega was an actual competitor, like in the console wars. So seeing Sega Saturn coming across its 24th anniversary is something it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's just wow. Time flies. But seeing that we're getting close to the 25th anniversary of the Sega Saturn, it'd be interesting to see whether or not Sega decides to do something special with the Sega Saturn, like release a Sega Saturn Mini, similar to how they did with this, like how they're gonna do with the Sega Mega Drive Mini, and how they did with the Sega Genesis. They had like a portable a portable game system that had preloaded Sega games like Sonic, Streets of Rage, all that stuff on it. It'll be interesting to see if they do anything like that with any of the Sega Saturn games sometime in the future. But, until then, we'll just have to wait and see. But, happy anniversary to Sega Saturn, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not, Sega decides to do anything with this game system, or whether or not they'll take any of the games from that console and release remakes of it for any current generation game systems such as Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, or even the PlayStation 4.